Welcome to our deep dive, everyone. Today we're diving deep into backup and recovery systems,
Yeah.
really looking at it through the lens of Module 2
Yeah.
in this DellEMC course.
Right.
But it's a topic that should be very, very familiar to all of you listening.
Absolutely.
And, the core idea here is that none of us want to lose our data,
Right.
whether that's pictures, financial information, our work files, the code we're working on.
Right.
We need a way to protect that data.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really where these backup and recovery systems come in.
For sure.
So in this module, we're going to explore the architecture,
Mm-hmm.
the workflows, and really some of the cool advanced features
Right.
that are in these modern backup and recovery systems.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot to unpack, but I think, one way to kind of think about it
Okay.
is we're going to first give you the building blocks.
Yeah.
So the foundation upon which these systems are built.
Right.
Then we're going to look at how they actually work in practice. So kind of the step-by-step process of both backing up
Mm-hmm.
and recovering data.
Okay.
And then we'll look at some of those like cool
Right.
sort of advanced features that are really becoming more and more essential
Yeah.
as data grows and the demands on these systems grow.
For sure.
So the way this module breaks down, it's actually split into 3 lessons.
Okay.
The first one focuses on the architecture components.
Okay.
So really the building blocks that we're talking about.
Right.
Then lesson 2 is going to look at backup and recovery workflows.
Okay.
So that step-by-step process.
Yep.
And then finally, lesson 3 looks at the really interesting enterprise backup system features.
Right.
So things that are really, I guess make these systems even more powerful.
For sure.
So why don't we jump right in
Let's do it.
to lesson 1 and talk about the backup recovery system architecture components.
Okay. Sounds good.
So to set the stage here, if we're talking about a traditional backup recovery system,
Mm-hmm.
it's usually designed in this kind of multi-tiered client-server model.
Okay.
And there's several key players involved.
Right.
So let's start with what I think is probably the most well-known component,
Okay.
which is the backup server.
The backup server.
So what is the backup server and what does it do?
Right. So the backup server is kind of like the brain
Okay.
of the whole operation.
Okay.
It manages all of the backup and recovery operations,
Okay.
and it also keeps track of everything that's backed up.
Okay.
In what's called the backup catalog.
Okay. So it's almost like if you're thinking about an office,
Oh.
it's like the administrator
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, like a project manager.
or project manager. Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
So the backup server is sort of in charge,
Mhm.
makes the decisions,
Yep.
keeps track of things.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily do all the work.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
So that's where I think the next component comes in. And that would be the storage node, or sometimes it's referred to as the media server.
Storage node or the media server.
So what is this component's role?
The storage node is really where the rubber hits the road, I guess.
Okay.
This is the workhorse of the system.
Okay.
So it receives the data from the clients,
Okay.
writes it to the storage,
Okay.
and then sends metadata back to the server to let it know
Okay.
that it completed successfully.
Okay.
And then it's also responsible for getting that data back
Okay.
during the recovery process.
So it's like the hands-on worker.
Exactly.
Right. It's the one that's actually dealing with the data,
Mm-hmm.
sending it, receiving it, moving it around.
Yeah.
And of course, we need somewhere to send this data from, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the third component comes in,
Yep.
the backup client.
The backup client.
So what is the backup client?
So the backup client is really just the source of the data
Okay.
that we're trying to protect. Whether that's a server, a database,
Mm-hmm.
an application,
Okay.
whatever it is that we need to protect,
Okay.
the backup client is responsible for making consistent copies
Okay.
of that data
Yeah.
and sending it off to the storage node.
So it's like the messenger.
Exactly.
Right. It's the one that's gathering the information
Yeah.
and sending it along.
Yep.
So we've got the backup server, the storage node, the backup client.
Yep.
We need one more piece to this puzzle.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, the backup storage itself.
Right. The backup storage.
So this is where the actual backup data resides.
Yep.
But I think one of the interesting things here is that there's not just one type of backup storage.
There's definitely not just one type.
Right. There's a whole bunch of different options.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, what are some of the most common types of backup storage?
So the most common that you'll see are physical tape libraries.
Okay.
So that's your kind of
Yeah.
traditional tape backup.
Like the big reels of tape, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then you've got virtual tape libraries.
Okay, now what's a virtual tape library?
A virtual tape library is basically just a disk
Okay.
that's pretending to be a tape library.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's still like a tape, but it's actually stored on disks.
It's stored on disk, yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And then you've got disk-based production storage.
Okay.
So this is just using the same storage that you're using
For the actual data.
for your production data.
Okay.
And then disk-based backup storage with deduplication.
Okay, so that's a little different
That's a little different.
than just regular disk.
Yeah.
So what's deduplication?
So deduplication is a way of saving space on your storage.
Okay.
Basically, it looks for duplicate blocks of data
Okay.
and only stores one copy.
Okay.
So, if you've got a bunch of files that are very similar,
Mm-hmm.
it'll only store the differences between them.
Okay, so it's like a space-saving technique.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
And then we've got cloud-based storage.
Ah, the cloud.
The cloud.
So that's becoming more and more popular.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, you said there were hybrid solutions.
Yep.
So what's a hybrid solution?
Hybrid solutions basically just combine multiple types of storage
Okay.
into one system.
So you could have like a tape library and cloud storage
Exactly.
all working together. Okay.
Yep.
So it seems like there's no shortage of options when it comes to backup
No
storage.
shortage at all.
So I guess the question then becomes, how do you choose the right one?
That is the question.
Right. What factors should you consider?
There's a lot of factors to consider.
Okay.
But some of the main ones would be how much data do you need to store?
Okay.
How quickly do you need to be able to recover it?
Okay.
And of course, your budget.
Always the budget.
Always the budget.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
You've got to figure out what's the right mix for your particular needs.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we have a good understanding of those core components.
Right.
Right? We've got the backup server,
Yeah.
the storage node,
Yeah.
the backup client, and of course the backup storage itself.
Mhm.
But those are just the pieces.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
We need to figure out how they actually work together
Yeah, how they fit together.
to protect our data.
Exactly.
So that's where lesson 2 comes in,
Okay.
which focuses on the backup and recovery workflows.
Right. The processes.
The processes, exactly.
Yeah.
So how does the data actually flow through the system?
How does it all work together?
How does it all work together?
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, so we've got our team assembled, our data protection squad, if you will.
Right.
We know who the players are,
Yep.
but now we need to see them in action.
Yeah. How does it actually work?
Right, what's the play? How do we actually protect this data? So lesson 2 focuses on those backup and recovery workflows.
Okay.
So the actual, step-by-step processes
Just stacks.
that make this all happen.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the backup workflow.
Okay.
So the goal here, obviously, is to create a secure copy of our data.
Right. Make a copy.
Make a copy, get it somewhere safe.
Yep.
So walk me through it.
Okay.
How does this process actually start?
So it all starts with the backup server.
Okay.
The backup server is the one who initiates the backup.
So it's kind of like the maestro
Yeah, exactly.
conducting the orchestra.
Yeah.
So the backup server says, okay, time to make a backup.
Right.
What happens next?
So the backup server first checks the backup catalog.
Okay, now what's the backup catalog?
So the backup catalog is like a database
Okay.
that contains information about all the backups that have been performed.
Okay, so it's kind of like a record,
Yeah, it's a record or an index.
an index of
all the
data.
backups.
So it knows what's been backed up, when it was backed up,
Exactly.
where it's stored. Okay. So the backup server checks the catalog,
Mm-hmm.
says, okay, this is what needs to be backed up.
Right. Then what? So then the backup server will send instructions to both the storage node
Right.
and the backup clients.
So it's communicating with both of those components.
Right. It's saying, okay, storage node, get ready to receive some data.
Okay.
And backup clients, this is the data I need you to send.
So the storage node is getting ready,
Yep. Getting the media ready.
whether that's tape or disk or
Mhm.
cloud.
Mm.
Okay.
Right.
And the backup clients are like, okay, I got to grab this data,
Yep.
package it up, and send it over.
Exactly.
Okay.
So then the clients will start sending the data to the storage node.
Okay.
And at the same time, they'll also be sending metadata.
Okay, now hold on. Metadata.
Metadata.
What's metadata?
So metadata is basically data about data.
Okay, so it's not the actual data itself.
No.
It's information about the data.
Right. So it could be things like the file name,
Okay.
the file size, the date it was created, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
So it's like a label.
Yeah, exactly like a label.
Okay.
So the clients send that metadata to the backup server
Okay, so why is that important?
so that the backup server can keep track of everything
Okay.
that's being backed up.
So it's like a receipt.
Yeah, kind of like a receipt. It
Yeah.
says, hey, I got this data from this client.
Okay, so the storage node is getting the actual data.
Mm-hmm.
The backup server is getting the metadata, the receipt. Okay.
Right.
So the data's been sent.
Ah.
What happens next?
So then the storage node will confirm
Okay.
that the data has been written successfully,
Okay.
and it'll send a message back to the server.
Saying, hey, I got it. It's all good.
Yeah, I got it. It's all stored.
Okay.
And then finally, the backup server will update the catalog
Okay.
to reflect the completed backup.
So it's adding a new entry to that index.
Exactly.
Saying, okay, this backup was performed on this date.
Yep.
This is where it is, and everything's good.
Right.
Okay, so that's the backup workflow.
That's the backup workflow.
We've got a copy of our data safely stored away.
Typically stored away, hopefully.
Hopefully, right?
Yeah.
But what happens if, disaster strikes?
Right.
And we need to get that data back.
We need to recover.
We need to recover, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the recovery workflow.
Okay.
So how does this process differ from the backup workflow?
So the recovery workflow basically starts with the client saying, hey, I need this data back.
Okay, so the client realizes, oh no, I've lost something.
Right, something's happened.
I need to recover it.
Yeah. Okay. So they send a request to the backup server.
Saying, hey, I need this data back. Oh, okay.
And the backup server will then go to the catalog.
Okay, that all-important catalog.
Yep.
So it's like going back to the library.
Exactly.
And saying, okay, where is this book?
Where's that data?
Right.
Yeah.
Where is this data stored?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the backup server consults the catalog, says, here it is.
I know where it is.
I know where it is.
Yeah.
Then what?
Then it'll instruct the storage node to retrieve that data.
Okay, so the storage node gets involved again.
Right, the storage node is the one who actually has the data.
Right, it's the one that's actually holding it.
Yep.
Okay.
So the storage node retrieves the data and then sends it back to the client.
Okay, so it goes directly back to the client.
Directly to the client.
It doesn't have to go through the backup server again.
Nope, straight to the client.
Okay, that's efficient.
Yep.
And then, just like before, the storage node sends metadata back to the backup server.
Right.
Saying, hey, I sent this data
Yep.
to this client.
It's all good.
Right. It's all good.
Yeah.
And the backup server updates the catalog again.
Right, to say that the recovery was successful.
Okay, so the catalog is really like the central nervous system here.
It is, yeah.
Right. It's the brain. It's keeping track of everything.
Exact of everything.
So it seems like these backup and recovery workflows,
Yeah.
they're pretty straightforward.
Fairly straightforward, yep.
Right. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
It is, yeah.
There's a lot of communication, a lot of moving parts.
Yep.
And, this is really just the foundation.
Right, this is the basics.
Right, of a good data protection strategy.
Exactly.
But there's a lot more to consider.
There is, yeah.
We've got to think about things like cloning and staging, replication, archiving.
Yep.
And those are all things that we're going to dive into
Okay.
in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've covered the foundation, the workflows.
Right, the basics.
But now it's time to get to the really fun stuff.
Yeah, the cool features.
The cool features, right?
Mm-hmm.
So lesson 3 focuses on these enterprise backup system features.
Okay.
And this is where things get really interesting.
For sure.
So these are features that go beyond just basic backup and recovery.
Right, they provide extra functionality.
Extra functionality, they enhance the capabilities, they make things more efficient.
Exactly.
So let's dive in and talk about some of these features.
Okay, let's do it.
So the first one I want to talk about is online backups.
Online backups.
So what are online backups?
So online backups are backups that happen while the system is still running.
Okay, so no downtime.
No downtime, exactly.
So traditionally, you would have to take things offline
Right.
to back them up.
Yep.
But with online backups, you can keep things running
Keep everything up and running.
while the backup is happening in the background.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does that actually work?
So it really relies on application modules and local replicas.
Okay, so application modules, what are those?
So application modules are basically pieces of software
Okay.
that understand how to communicate with specific applications.
Okay.
So you might have an application module for your database
Mm.
or for your email server.
So it's like a translator.
Yeah, like a translator.
Okay.
And these modules allow the backup system to create consistent copies of the data,
Okay.
even while the application is still running.
Okay. So it's like having a mechanic
Okay.
that can work on your car
Yeah,
while you're still driving it.
exactly.
Right. So it's happening in real time.
Yeah, it's all happening behind the scenes.
Okay, cool.
And then the local replicas,
Mm-hmm.
those are basically just copies of the data
Okay.
that are stored on the same system as the production data.
Okay, so it's like a local copy.
A local copy, yeah.
Okay.
And once the local replica is created,
Yeah.
then it can be backed up.
Okay, so you're not backing up the live data.
Right.
You're backing up this local replica.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
that way the production system isn't impacted.
Got it. Okay, so online backups, very cool.
Very cool.
Let's move on to another interesting feature.
Okay.
LAN-free backups.
LAN-free backups.
Now, what in the world is a LAN-free backup?
So LAN-free backups, also sometimes called SAN-based backups,
Okay.
they basically just use a different network
Okay.
for the backup traffic.
Okay, so instead of using the regular network,
Right, the local area network.
they use a different network.
Yep, storage area network.
Storage area network, or a SAN.
Or a SAN, yeah.
Okay, so why is that important?
So it's important because it takes the backup traffic off of the regular network.
Okay.
So it doesn't impact the performance of other applications.
Okay, so it's like having a dedicated highway
Yeah, exactly.
for your backup data.
Yep.
Okay, so it's not going to get bogged down in traffic.
Right, no traffic jams.
Okay, that's cool.
And these SANs are usually very high speed.
Okay.
So the backups can happen very quickly.
Okay, so faster backups,
Faster backups, yeah.
less impact on the network.
Exactly.
Okay, I like it.
Another feature that's becoming more popular is serverless backups.
Serverless backups. Okay, now this sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So how do you have a backup without a server?
So it's not that there's no server at all. It's just that the backup server isn't directly involved in the backup process.
Okay.
So instead of the backup server talking to the client and then the client sending the data to the storage node,
Yeah.
you have a proxy server.
Okay, so there's another server involved.
So there's another server involved, yeah.
All right.
And the proxy server basically takes over the role of the client.
Okay.
So the backup server talks to the proxy server,
Mm-hmm.
and then the proxy server talks to the storage node.
Okay, and why is that beneficial?
So it's beneficial because it takes the load off of the client,
Okay.
so the client doesn't have to do all the work of sending the data.
Okay, so it's like delegating the task.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
And this can be especially helpful
Yeah.
if you've got a very busy client
Okay,
that can't afford to be slowed down by a backup.
got it. Okay, so serverless backups, another way to improve efficiency.
Exactly.
Let's talk about a feature that's specifically designed for NAS devices.
Okay.
NDMP three-way backup.
NDMP three-way backup.
Now, first of all, remind me what NAS stands for.
NAS stands for Network Attached Storage.
Network attached storage. Okay, so it's basically just a storage device.
Right. It's a storage device that's connected to the network.
Okay.
And it's often used for file sharing.
Okay. Yeah, that's very common.
Yep.
So what is this NDMP three-way backup?
So NDMP stands for Network Data Management Protocol.
Okay.
And it's basically just a way for the backup system to communicate with the NAS device.
Okay.
And in a three-way backup,
Yeah.
the backup server talks to the NAS device.
Yeah.
The NAS device talks to the storage node.
Okay, so it's like a triangle.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
And the benefit of this is that the data doesn't have to go through the backup server.
Okay, so again, it's about efficiency.
Efficiency, yeah.
Okay.
And it can also be done online.
Okay, so no downtime for the NES device?
Right.
Okay, that's good.
And it can also be done LAN-free.
Okay, so using the SAN.
Yep.
All right, so we're hitting all the good points here.
All the good points, yep.
Let's talk about a feature that's very important in the world of virtualization.
Okay.
Image-based backups.
Image-based backups.
So what are image-based backups?
So image-based backups are basically a way of backing up an entire virtual machine.
Okay, so not just the files and folders.
Right, not just the individual files.
With the whole system.
The whole system, yeah.
Okay.
So it's like taking a snapshot
Okay.
of the entire virtual machine.
Okay. And how is that done?
So there's a couple ways to do it.
Okay.
One way is to use guest backup.
Okay.
And that's basically where you install a backup client
Yeah.
inside the virtual machine.
So just like on a physical server.
Yep, just like on a physical server.
Okay.
And then the client backs up the files and folders.
Okay. Within the virtual machine.
Okay, so that's one way.
That's one way.
What's the other way?
The other way is to use what's called image-based backup.
Okay.
And this is where the backup system talks directly to the virtualization platform.
Okay.
So it doesn't need a client.
Oh, okay. So it's more direct.
It's more direct, yeah.
Okay.
And it can usually be done online and land-free as well.
Okay, so it's hitting all the good points again.
All good points.
All right, let's talk about cloud support.
Cloud support.
So a lot of organizations are moving to the cloud.
Right, the cloud is everywhere.
The cloud is everywhere, right?
Yep.
So how do backup systems integrate with the cloud?
So modern backup systems are designed to work with the cloud.
Okay.
They can back up data directly to cloud storage.
Okay.
And they can also recover data from cloud storage.
Okay. So it's a two-way street.
It's a two-way street, yeah.
Okay.
And there's a few things to look for.
Okay.
When you're evaluating a backup system for cloud support, okay, what are those things?
One thing is multi-tenancy.
Okay, multi-tenancy, what's that?
So multi-tenancy means that the backup system
Yeah.
can support multiple customers or tenants.
Okay.
And each tenant's data is kept separate.
Okay, so it's like having multiple backup systems in one.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Another thing to look for is support for different cloud storage options.
Okay, so not just one specific cloud provider.
Right. You want to be able to choose the cloud provider that's best for you.
Got it.
And then another thing to look for is REST APIs.
REST APIs. Okay, now those are for developers?
Yeah, those are for developers.
Okay.
But basically, they allow other applications
Yeah.
to interact with the backup system.
Okay, so it's about integration.
It's about integration, yeah.
Okay.
And then finally, deduplication support is important for the cloud as well.
Right, because we're talking about a lot of data.
A lot of data.
And we want to save space.
Save space, save money.
Save money. Okay. So cloud support is becoming essential.
It is, yeah.
And backup systems are evolving to meet those needs.
For sure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
A lot of ground. Yep.
We've talked about the basic components of backup and recovery systems.
Right.
We've looked at the workflows involved.
Yeah.
And we've explored some of the really cool advanced features
The cool features, yeah.
that are available in these modern systems. So hopefully you now have a better understanding of how these systems work and why they're so important.
Absolutely.
Remember, data loss can happen to anyone.
It can happen to anyone, yeah.
So be prepared.
Be prepared.
Have a plan.
Have a plan.
And choose the right tools for the job.
Exactly.
All right, well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.